everyone. Welcome back to Keto and Crime and Thought Crime for Impromptu Part 3 of the Chad Daybell's epic autobiography, Living on the Edge of Heaven. We made it up to Chapter 17 in our last part, so we're going to delve into that. First, a little housekeeping. If you'd like to support the channel, I highly, highly appreciate it, though it's never required. You can do that by hitting the like button for the YouTube algorithm. You can subscribe, which if you haven't, I hope I earn your subscription this time. And if you can, hit the join button down below and join my fabulous members, or join my Patreon, which is also down below. I have 8 wonderful patrons over there. We meet once or twice a month via Zoom where we can talk and have a good time. You get early access to my videos, and we have a good time. And without them, their money helps me. The money they give me helps me improve the equipment, buy new software, buy the books that you guys want me to summarize for you. So this is how we're going to play it. I'm going to, and to my patrons and channel members, I hope you're not upset. I'm going to try to save as much time on this one so I can get through the entirety of the 7 chapters that are left in this book today. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I will not relay patrons and channel members' names in this video. I hope you understand, but they are all wonderful. Love you all. But the game plan is for me to finish this today. The David Warwick reaction, I'm going to get it out to you as a late week bonus episode, so you'll see that Thursday or Friday, and then next week's schedule will remain unchanged, at least as far as I know. So I appreciate your patience with me. Thank you so much. And with that, let's delve into Chapter 17 of Chad Daybell's autobiography. It's not vodka. That's what I ought to be drinking. It's sparkling mineral water, but I felt like chugging. I'm keto now, back on keto, so I can't really have the wine, which I really enjoy. And I'm also staying away from all alcohol, because when you're on keto, not eating a whole lot of carbs, you get drunk very fast. So I haven't been able to soothe the madness with wine as I usually would. So I had to have something, so I'm using sparkling mineral water. But let's get into it. So when we last left Mr. Daybell, he had signed on as the managing editor of Cedar Fort Publishing. And he was now their editor-in-chief, managing editor, however you want to call it. And he was talking about the owner/co-editor-in-chief of it, Lee Nelson, who, according to him, was a legend among LDS publishers and writers in the 80s and 90s. He had written a fictional Storm Testament series, as well as a Beyond the Veil series, so I'm beginning to see who Daybell considered a mentor when it comes to his religious beliefs. And together they worked to jumpstart the editorial department. He hired a wonderful woman by the name, he said, of Georgia Carpenter, who was the marketing director. She had a lot of years of experience in the publishing department. She helped him choose good authors. She marketed those books. She really got Cedar Fort's works out there. Chad himself said that he had some nonfiction ideas percolating in his mind, and he wanted to go ahead and write them and get it out there. And that included that coffee table coaster book, Arianic Priesthood, the Youth of Zion, and a Tiny Talk series for primary children that he and Tammy co-wrote. So it's idiocy for children. So according to him, not only was he signing terrific authors, he was putting out great work himself, he and Tammy. They were doing 2 book signings every Saturday. Tammy even did some for the Tiny Tots series. And he began talking about their local stake president, David Ridges, who was getting close to retiring, and he was teaching at the local Orem LDS Institute. He relayed a story where this guy had even rescued Tammy and the children by throwing snowballs at a vicious dogs that were chasing them. Were they zombie dogs? Did he throw wonderful spiritual snowballs at them, Chad? Was that it? Were they zombie dogs? Were they like hounds of hell? Anyway, this David had published a book on kind of doctrine called Isaiah Made Easier. He had basically interpreted the book of Isaiah, making it easy to understand. And I guess Chad had a hand in getting this book published. However, that same week that book was published and became a bestseller, that he cut his hand badly with an electric saw and didn't think he would ever be writing again because he couldn't type anymore. A few months after the accident, Chad saw David's wife, Jeanette, at the grocery store, and the Spirit commanded him, go tell her that Dave needs to write more books. So, Chad and David worked out a plan to start making a Made Easier series that would evaluate every verse of Scripture in the Bible and the Book of Mormon. They reissued Isaiah Made Easier, and then they began with the Book of Mormon, and since it would be the church's course of study the following year. According to him, these books started to explode into a best-selling series of LDS publishing. They made scriptures easier to read for hundreds of thousands of people. So now we skip ahead to early 2004 in chapter 18. He had been on the publishing treadmill at Cedar Fort. He was continuing to produce great books. He loved working with both Lee and Georgia, but he said he needed a mental break. But he didn't see any parts in the curtain or the veil or any light at the end of the tunnel, and he was tired. One night he left the office about 8 o'clock thinking he was finally caught up. When he got there the next day, he said there were 8 more manuscripts on his desk for him to edit and review. He said he snapped. He went home. He told Tammy he was done. She agreed. So he wrote up his letter of resignation and took it in and went about calling Computer Access to see if he could come back to work for them. The Cedar Fort tried to rally and bring him back with an even better offer. He said no and went home unemployed. Doing what Chad does, he went to the temple. He was in the celestial room praying, hoping for some other vision, and an audible voice spoke to him and said, Chad, thou shalt not go back to work for Cedar Fort. Thou shalt start your own publishing company. And they formed Spring Creek Book Company the following month. He said Cedar Fort wouldn't give him any of the rights to his former works that he could put out on his own, although they did continue paying him royalties. That they weren't doing you a favor, Chad. That's the law. He wasn't legally allowed to bring over any of their authors, so he had literally had to start from scratch. So he said he was Spring Creek's only author, and so he started to turn out some books. They hired Tammy's mom, Phyllis, as the sales director, and she had a lot of years of experience in retail. And so she was able to build a good rapport with many store managers across the country and Christian bookstores, LDS bookstores, and soon they were off and running. By the end of 2004, they had published 24 books, some by Chad, some by other authors that he began to recruit across the country. One of the more popular books was one called Bright Ideas for Young Women Leaders. It was basically a manual to tell Mormon women how to be all that they can be, but don't leave the home to do it. So it ended up being one that he said they had a hard time keeping in stock. It was also about this time he published the biography of Alex Smith, who was a University of Utah football star, also a Mormon, that had gone #1 in the 2001 NFL draft. They ended up being a huge copy. It sold 500 copies in their first pre-book signing at the University of Utah. So that ended up being a really good one. He also contacted American Idol finalist Carmen Rasmussen, who was also a LDS, and had her write a book called Staying in Tune that sold thousands of copies. So he's really looking around for Mormon celebrities to get them to write a book so that he can publish it. Miss Utah, Miss America contestant Jill Stevens wrote one called It's All Good. So yeah, he really based his thing off living off other people's popularity. Sounds familiar. He then decided maybe they should go a different route. He was contacted by an old friend by the name of Shirley, who told him about a woman named Susan Freeman, who had a near-death experience and wanted to write publicly about it. But she was feeling shy, so Shirley had met her, who was also one of Chad's authors, had met her and made some notes and thought Chad should seriously discuss the possibility of turning what happened to her into a book. So he went to meet with Suzanne, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, this is where his fascination with publishing near-death experience books came from. He had a long conversation with her in her home in Ephraim, Utah. She gave him the synopsis of her near-death experience, as well as visions she had been having since, which kind of foretold of bad things. And she was explaining she was a housewife. She never thought she could be an author, but he evidently decided to sign her and ask her to put out her story. He asked her to put out the whole story, bad visions and all, but she didn't really want to do that. So he said, okay, just publish the actual near-death experience then. Let's not do the bad visions you've been having. Because she was nervous. She had been ridiculed by her family and her community, calling her, bad names, probably calling her a witch. And so within a few months, Led by the Hand of Christ was published, which told of her near-death experiences. A few months later, he even convinced her to go ahead and publish the book of visions she had had, and that also became a bestseller for Chad. And as a result, Suzanne had a nice follow-up career as a public speaker and a leader of women's groups and women's outreaches. Doesn't Chad just do some wonderful things? It was after the success of Suzanne's books that Chad said that he needed to be more honest about his own spiritual findings, so he decided to write the Standing in Holy Places series, which I have not read any of those. They're basically kind of an apocalyptic end of the world type of thing with a lot more spirituality. I don't know how you can get any more spiritual than the book series we read, but he started writing those about this time. He went on to comment that his God tear had still never healed up, so he was still seeing all kinds of future scenes, and that because of the visions he had seen, particularly one when he was out in the wilderness near Utah-Idaho border, he had a vision of a lot of tents set up, much like the tents that we read in those novels, read about in those novels. And so he decided, okay, my first book in this series is going to be called The Great Gathering, and it was going to be set about 10 years in the future. He felt that it was going to be a hard sell because this was 2006. This is prior to the 2008-2009 recession. So we were still in that lovely in-between period where anybody could get a home. There were low interest credit cards. People were refinancing and buying bigger and better stuff. So he said that setting it 10 years in the future, maybe he would have a better chance of selling an apocalyptic book that started with an economic collapse. He said while he was writing, he started to have visions of the Oval Office and an unknown president sitting with his back to him. He said it wasn't President Bush, who was actually the president during this time. It was a future president, which we ascertained in reading some of his apocalyptic books. That was Barack Obama, so he didn't like Barack. So, yeah. The most challenging part, he said, of writing this book was detailing the foreign invasion of America, because no one would believe that could ever happen. He saw different snippets of destruction and terror in bigger U.S. cities. He saw tanks go into the Spanish Fork canyons. Literally, he said he was seeing all this. He envisioned the military scenes of all the bloody battles, all kinds of weird stuff going on in Chad's future United States. So he finally finished this first novel, The Great Gathering. His dad edited it for him, and he was ready to go to press. He said, maybe I should just expand it or go ahead and start a second novel. But he said he was about to do that when he heard a voice saying, that's enough for now. A time will come when you can write about it with greater clarity. God, Tear. He said he didn't know what that meant, but it came to him soon when he got the idea for 3 novels that were set at the same time as The Great Gathering, which was the Times of Turmoil series. That's the series we read. So the series we read was within this Standing in Holy Places series. So all the 3 of the books we read, 1 through 3, were based on events happening in the time of The Great Gathering. So if you want expansion on those stories, read The Great Gathering. Should I read The Great Gathering? Let me know down below. By now it was early 2008 and the recession was starting. Lots of people were losing their jobs. The big banks had rubbed us up and lubed us down and didn't even buy us dinner. So, as he said, he saw storm clouds on the horizon at the LDS Booksellers Convention. He said he heard store owners, everybody reassuring them that people would still want to read no matter what. Well, unfortunately, no, they won't. They were basing that on the fact that people still bought books and stuff during the Great Depression. Well, that was before all the electronic entertainment they have, so books were pretty far down on the list of what people would buy. And they quit buying books, so bookstores started to close. Publishers had a hard time selling any copies. A lot of their books were returned from bookstores to the warehouse that they had bought to house all their books. All their books were returned to the warehouse for credit, and no one wanted to buy them. So Spring Hill Books started to fall into disarray. So as chapter 19 opens, we see Spring Creek Books being put into what Chad called hibernation. They turned over the remaining inventory in their warehouse to a distributor called Brigham, who would ship books as they were ordered by individual customers. He put them online, he put them on Amazon, he put them on his own website and said, once somebody orders one, ship it, which weren't a whole lot, he said. They scraped by financially. Tammy, who had been the bookkeeper for Spring Creek, was suffering. She felt she should have seen this coming. She blamed herself. Her mental health took a downturn, but she still tried to power through. She took a part-time job as a computer lab teacher at the local art school. A local cemetery sexton in Spanish Fork, Utah, was about to retire, so Chad, with 149 other people, applied for the job, and he was actually hired. So around Christmas time in 2008, he started as a sexton or gravedigger for a new cemetery. His new salary was almost as big as what he had at the computer company, and it had great benefits, so he was really pleased to have had this great opportunity to get this job. Tammy's mental health was still suffering because she blamed herself for the collapse of their publishing company, even though financially they were now doing better than they ever had between her now full-time job as a teacher at the art school, because I worked in school in for-profit colleges during the recession, and I never had a lack of work because everybody that was laid off was going back to school. Same for Tammy. And people always die, so that's why he had a gravedigger job. And so he said they were doing much better than they had ever done before. He actually gave her a special priesthood blessing, hopefully to heal her mental illness. And he said during this special blessing, he saw Tammy in the world beyond the veil, giving blessings, doing great work, ministering to all kinds of people. And he had a vision that Tammy's life would be short, and she had work to do beyond the veil. Yeah, we know where that led, don't we? So Tammy did recover. She started encouraging him to write. He continued writing both the Standing in Holy Places and Times of Turmoil series. And they would still publish that under Spring Creek Books. He also had a encounter with a boy spirit at the cemetery, and it told him that he was destined for greatness. Tammy's grandmother, Lucille, also appeared to him and said, it's time for you to let Tammy shoulder some of the load. You can't do this by yourself. He also had a vision of other members of Tammy's family telling him to let her shoulder some of the burden. I don't know what burden he's talking about. She has a job. He has a job. They're not he's writing. I mean, I don't get, this is where this book kind of veered off the tracks a little bit. 20 opens, they're at a Provo temple where Chad is having an encounter again with Grandma Lucille, who tells him he is meant to protect the children of Earth from Satan, and that he should encourage all of his children to go on their missions early, which he does, and they do. You're meant to protect the children, Chad. Not hurt them. Not burn them and leave them buried on your freaking property out in Idaho. So, by the time we get to chapter 22, the recession is starting to end around 2010, and he says he still has 20 books from Spring Hill in print, and those older titles are starting to sell, so Tammy's spirits are up because she sees the fruit of their labors. He said as he starts to speak to book clubs all around the valley, promoting his new novels as well. In January of 2014, he started delving into a preparedness website. So I think this is where a vow came into play, and he met somebody named Julie Rowe, who was also said that she had visions and had a near-death experience. That's when he and Tammy went to meet her at BYU's Bean Museum. They published 2 or 3 books together. So he started kind of reviving his publishing career along this time. He also talks about he gave up the sexton job because it was getting to be too rough on him. He wanted to concentrate on publishing again, so he took a part-time job with his brother-in-law, Jason Gwillem's window installation company, and did that part-time. He and Tammy started to take the children on vacations when they all got back from their missions, and just delving into family life seemed to be the going trend for the Daybells in 2014, 2015. So I think this is before, a vow really went to his head. He was becoming quite a celebrity on a vow. He started doing the Prepare the People broadcast because he was really into Apocalyptic, because that's what he had been writing. He also finished Days of Fury, which was one of the books we read around this time. In February of 2015, he had a fork in the road vision, another one, where he looked to the right and saw a glorious city on a hill, where a voice told him to move to Rexburg, Idaho, because it would be a tremendous blessing to his children and grandchildren. The other fork had him staying in Springville, and he saw many lost opportunities spiritually and financially. So they started looking at land and houses in Rexburg, and ended up buying the property where the FBI would search one day for the remains of 2 innocent children. So they closed on that house early June of 2015. He also was starting to publish other books around this time. A friend named Scott was also publishing a book. He finished Days of Fury, sent it to publish, and he learned to find solace in working at the BYU Idaho campus library. And this is where the book closes. Him living in Rexburg with Tammy, his children thriving, him writing books at the BYU library, and Tammy working in Rexburg. Oh, if Tammy only knew what was ahead of her. I wish I could warn you, girl. Anyway, that ends Chad Daybell's autobiography. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below if I should read that other series, and I'll do it. Other than that, I will see you very soon with the David Warwick. I will try to get it out by the end of the week. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you real soon. Until next time, Keto Comic.